Our breastfeeding and getting back to work and school. This is a workshop for community health and others who work with families and communities. And I'm Ann Gainey. I'm your host from the Minnesota Community Health Worker Alliance. This workshop is one of 4 workshops that have been by the Minnesota Breastfeeding Coalition in partnership with Minnesota Community Health Worker Alliance. And we're really excited about this partnership. It's been a wonderful partnership this fall, or this spring. And I would like to introduce Linda Kopecky, is the executive director of the Minnesota Breastfeeding Coalition. Hi, Linda.
Everybody, welcome to this webinar. I'm Linda Kopecky. I'm the interim executive director of the Minnesota Breastfeeding Coalition. So we're an organization or a collection of coalitions and partners from across the state of Minnesota dedicated to promoting, supporting, and protecting breastfeeding. And we have over 30 breastfeeding coalitions in the entire state. We have the Hmong Breastfeeding Coalition, the Indigenous Breastfeeding Coalition, regional coalitions, and then small local coalitions at the county level. So if you're interested in getting more involved in your community in breastfeeding and making sure that all families have access to the services and the skilled support to reach their breastfeeding goals, consider partnering with your local breastfeeding coalition or your cultural breastfeeding coalition. I'm excited about this partnership with the Minnesota Community Health Worker Alliance. This is born out of a desire to make sure that community health workers have in their toolkit the knowledge and skills to help families with their infant feeding needs, no matter what type of work they're doing. So these webinars will be available on the Minnesota Breastfeeding Coalition and the Community Health Worker Alliance websites. And I'm hoping we'll have another baby behavior training coming soon. We had one in August and it was wonderful. And it's a good foundational training or workshop for understanding the language of infants and toddlers. I'm hoping we'll have one coming up soon for community health workers. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Linda. So as we get started, please keep yourself muted during the presentation. You can use the chat box to ask questions, and we'll also stop periodically for questions and have time at the end for questions. If you have problems with bandwidth, sometimes it helps to turn off your video. And so let me introduce our speakers to you. First of all, we have Ann Oswood. Ann has been a nurse midwife for 26 years and doing outpatient clinical lactation visits for 10 years. She earned her certification as an international board certified lactation consultant 2 years ago. And she works at M Health Fairview in the East region, which used to be Health East. And at Woodbury and Maplewood clinics, she provides outpatient lactation support to families. And she's an at-large board member of the Minnesota Breastfeeding Coalition. We also have LaSherion McDonald here with us. LaSherion is a health educator, a doula, a lactation consultant, and a community health worker. She currently works at St. Paul Ramsey County Public Health, and she's one of the team of people working on revising and updating the Minnesota CHW certificate curriculum in the area of maternal child health. She brings a wealth of knowledge and resources to all she does based on her work with moms and families. And I want to just also introduce Shandy Potas-Mangra, who is a community health worker and works with the Minnesota Community Health Worker Alliance, who is here to join our discussion as well. And with that, I just want to welcome all of our participants and all of our speakers and turn it over to Ann and LaSherion and Shandy. Thank you. Welcome.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, thank you.
Is there anything that Shandy needs to say before we start with content?
I could read our objectives.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Presentation.
Yep.
Thanks, Ann.
Should we move to the next or the first slide?
So in the webinar, we're hoping to cover the following: planning tips to share with families before the baby comes, self-care, strategies to help mothers maintain a strong milk supply while working or attending school, facts to share with families about breast milk, pumping, and formula feeding while away from baby, ways to encourage self-advocacy at home, school, and work, and regarding balancing employment, personal and family needs, and stress management and balance.
Great.
Lots of things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So once women get through the first few days and weeks of breastfeeding, returning to work and school is really the next big hurdle that happens. A lot of women start thinking about it very early. Some people have months before they go back to work. Some people only have a few weeks. So what LaSherion and I are going to try to do is cover some main points so that you can be helpful to the families that you come in contact with when they approach you with concerns that they might have. So we have a lot of things can happen to prepare ahead of time so that women and families are more ready to return to work when that day comes. So some of that happens before the baby comes. So I'm going to let LaSherion get started with some of that, and then I'm going to start talking about some of the more clinical stuff.
Yeah, so it's good to start that conversation with your employer about, how will return to work look like? Where am I going to pump? How long am I going to have to pump? And is there a place where I can store the milk? It's also good to look at what childcare centers you're going to have your baby in as well. That's going to support breastfeeding and support you being able to keep up your milk supply and, keep that bond with the baby. And getting your friends and family on board with being support, just in case you're not going to have your child at a childcare center, educating, family and friends on how to store milk, which we'll talk about more on the slide. Talk to them about the importance of breastfeeding and why you're doing this so they can be a support for you when it's hard going back to school or work, trying to continue to breastfeed. If you have people in your ear who don't understand why you're breastfeeding, they could give you some negative comments. And a lot of the times it's not on purpose. They just don't understand. So it's good to educate your family and friends, whoever's going to be helping you with the baby when you return to work or school, about breastfeeding, getting them on board and getting them to be a positive support. Because as I said before, this whole transition is going to be really hard, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And you really need your support system to have those encouraging words and, know what to say and the right steps to take towards supporting you with that. Because without that, you might just say, hey, forget it. I'm not going to breastfeed anymore. I'm just going to give, do I need to do? So, yeah. So on the slide, it's law in Minnesota that you have to have a place where you can pump. And you have to have time to actually do that. So if you ever run into that, that's where it becomes a legal issue, because you have the right to pump during the workday for your child. And yeah, also talking about insurance. So I was told that, especially with a lot of my clients, their insurance does provide a pump, but it's good to know how long it's going to take. Because, I've had clients where they've given birth, but their pump was going to be delivered. It's free in like 2 to 3 weeks. And then by that time, they were just like, hey, I'm done with this. So it's good to know where you can get a free pump, or if it's not free, low cost, and how long it's going to take to get it. So, yeah.
LaSherion, I have a question for you.
Yes.
So it's such a great reminder that you posted about making sure that we know that it is a Minnesota law that protects women breastfeeding at work. And I'm thinking back to the question on childcare, making sure you have a childcare that supports breastfeeding. If I were working with a client and talking to them about this point, what would be kind of like a good things to consider for having a child care or neighbor care that helps promote breastfeeding? So what kind of like things would I go down on a checklist with the client regarding like what to look for? Or are there resources available?
Yes, there are some resources available. We do have a website that we can post and give to you all. It's called Finding Breastfeeding Friendly Childcare Centers. But some things to, oh, was this someone say anything? Okay, I'll finish. So yeah, we do have that resource as well. And also some things to look for is just to see, you know, when you go to the daycare, see how big is the space, what equipment they have available to help you breastfeed. Because I know some centers, they do allow you to breastfeed, but they don't have anywhere to pump or anywhere to set up the pumping equipment. And if that's important for you, then, you know, that may not be the right center for you. So just looking at, you know, what are you and the baby's needs? You know, do you want to go in and breastfeed if there's nowhere for you to set up, or do you want a place where they have everything for you to set up? Also, looking at if the child care center will allow someone, if you have that luxury of having someone bring the baby to you from work and then back to the child care center so you can breastfeed. Now, some child care centers don't allow that. And they don't allow it because, you know, they just want too many foot traffic in the child care and, you know, having to get the baby requiet, you know, things like that. So, you know, asking that question, hey, can somebody come and pick up my baby to take them to me? Or, you know, can I come in periodically? And, you know, how often and, you know, how long the baby belongs. I know certain centers, well, if the child is gone for a certain amount of time, you know, they just stay with you. So just, you know, asking those important questions, you know, just to get that prepared, because you don't want to go in, you know, thinking you can take your baby for a few hours and they say, hey, well, you know, we say if they're gone for like 2 or 3 hours, don't bring them back. And then you have like, okay, what am I going to do with my baby? Or if you go in and, you know, you don't like the space where you have to breastfeed or pump. So just using that as a checklist, you know, advocating for yourself, asking those questions and seeing what will be the right fit for you and your family. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you.
No problem.
There we go. So LaSherion touched on a little bit about breast pumps and finding out before the baby comes what can be covered. Most insurance does cover breast pumps for women. So before, I would encourage you, if this comes up with families that you're serving, to encourage families to check with their insurance and see if it does cover a breast pump. Most of the time it does. Medicaid does. Most private insurance companies do. TRICARE, which is the military insurance, does. So most do. Something to check on is when, like LaSherion said, when that pump can be covered. Some say you can get the pump before the baby actually comes, which is great because then you have the chance to examine it and kind of the woman gets to see how it works. Some don't cover the pump until the baby is actually out of the body and present. So that's something for the woman to know. There are different kinds of breast pumps that are covered by insurance, and so that's something to figure out. If insurance will cover a breast pump, oftentimes the family can get it directly from the clinic or hospital where the family gets their care. So that is super easy, and they can get it either before baby comes or at the hospital after baby comes, and it usually involves very little paperwork for the family. So I think this is something really important for families to know, because then they aren't going out and buying pumps at like Target or something else if they don't have to spend money on that, because they can often be covered. And the ones that are covered by insurance are usually quite good quality. So what we've got here is some pictures of some breast pumps. And I wanted to throw this slide in here because there are some really helpful things that community health workers could do that have to do with breast pumps. And I don't know how often it is that people would even be asked these questions, but on the left, we have a Medela pump and style breast pump, and on the right, we have a Spectra, which is a little bit newer kind of breast pump, but these are both commonly given out by clinics and hospitals and covered by insurance. The reason I put these here is that a couple things that might come up. The part that is kind of cone shaped is the part that goes on the woman's breast, and those can be different sizes. Usually pumps come with 2 different sizes, and sometimes those may fit the woman that you are helping and sometimes they might not. Pumping is not supposed to be painful. So if you should hear from a client that you're working with that she's having pain with pumping, it could be that the flanges, those cone-shaped things, are not the right size for her. It should not be the breast on into that the cone-shaped thing, the flange a little bit, and the nipple is drawn into that little tunnely part, but it should not be rubbing. The nipple should not be rubbing on the inside of the tunnely part. So if you hear that a client is complaining they're having a lot of pain with pumping, that might be something to bring up. You can get other sizes of flanges, larger and smaller, and a lactation consultant could help look at the right size. And sometimes lactation educators maybe can help with that. I don't know, do you do that, LaSherion? Do you help people with that?
With the correct size flange?
Yeah.
You know, so far I haven't had to do that. So far, the ones that the two sizes they get, one of them usually works.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, if I run into it now, I know that, you know, they can get you know, a size if the two that they give them don't work. Because yeah, usually the two that they give you are pretty, like, I don't know, common.
They are.
But yeah. So I haven't ran into that problem yet.
Okay, so it's a thing that could happen. Just want to throw that out there. And the other thing is that pumps have these little devices on the inside that, oh, we have a question here. Okay, I'll grab that in a sec. That the one on the left, there's a little yellow doodad, and the one on the right, the pink pump, you can see those little white triangular shaped things. Those stick down into the bottle and they help with the suction. They're really tiny and they can get lost or dropped or go into the dishwasher or disappear. And those are really, really important for suction. And a while ago, I was talking with a mother and she said, my pump doesn't work. I don't know what to do. My breasts are really full. My baby won't nurse. My pump doesn't work at all. I don't know what to do. And I said, well, have you seen those tiny little parts? Because if that little white circle comes off of that yellow thing, or if those little duckbill shaped things on the right by that pink pump aren't on there, the pump doesn't work at all. And this woman said, oh, well, those were really small, and I think my husband tossed them or left them in the box or something. And all you have to do is put those in place, and then the pump will work. So this is something super easy for the community health worker to deal with. Like, you could help the family put that back on, and you would be a star because you would have totally fixed their pump.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Pump. I'm sorry. What were you saying, LaSherion?
Oh no, I'm sorry. I was looking at the question. What were you saying?
Yeah, I can't see it. What's the question?
Let me see. I think it's more of a comment.
Oh, okay.
Let me see.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah. Oh, you see it?
Oh, yes. That moms can request a pump brand. That is true. Usually it's between, I know in the Twin Cities area, it's often between this Medela on the left and the Spectra on the right, but in other hospital systems and maybe in some outstate areas, it can be different things. But yes, that's true. Both of these work very well. Some people like the Spectra because it's a little quieter. Some people like the Medela because the parts are easier to get. Some people have used one with another baby, but yes, that's very true.
Yes, indeed. And you also can use handheld pumps as well.
Mm-hmm.
And those are just, they look like those ones, but, you know, you put them to the breast and you just do it this way. And it's no batteries, no charging. You don't have to plug it in, and it's just right there.
Quick and easy.
Yeah, quick and easy. Yeah, and cheaper. So.
Yes, right. So if a mother doesn't have to pump much, doesn't want to, her pump isn't covered by insurance, sometimes that's a great way to do it. I see Linda also commented that for parents who need to pump a lot because they're going back to work or school, sometimes a higher grade pump can be the best option, like a hospital grade pump. And those usually can be rented. And those are sometimes covered by insurance also. Those are a little bit pricier, but if you rent those are like $80 a month if you have to pay for them. But sometimes insurance will cover those with a prescription. So, or sometimes if a woman has a low milk supply problem or some other issue, like she's had breast surgery or something, that's an option as well.
So, Anne, just as a great reminder for CHWs, so if we do have mothers that come to us that say, you know, my pump is not working, then we can kind of diagnostically say, well, are they missing that small part? I forget what the name of that is.
Yeah.
And also, is it if the phalanges aren't working, is that, or if it's not the right size, does that also affect expression of milk?
It can, if it's not the right size, a woman might get more or less, but she should still get some. I mean, she should still feel suction. Some lactation consultants have a device that they can use to test to see how good the pump suction is. Some hospital lactation consultants have those. I have one. Several people in our clinics have one.
So it's just it's great to refer back to our lactation consultants at their hospital.
Yep, and people can also contact the company. I've heard that if people have questions for about their pump, or it's truly like broken, not working, they can get their pump replaced by the company.
Oh, great. Thanks, Anne.
Yep. And then just real quick on this slide so we can move on, there are, people should wash their pump every time they use it, and they should be sanitized once a day, which you can do in the dishwasher, or if folks don't have a dishwasher, you can put it in a pot of boiling water for about 5 minutes. And then I also just put a link here to a great video on paced bottle feeding, which is just about giving bottles to babies. We used to think that when we gave a bottle to a baby, that they would get used to the bottle and not like the breast anymore. And sometimes this can happen, but it's more about how the speed of the milk comes out than it is about what the shape of the nipple is. This is what we now think. And so sometimes there are ways that you can give bottles to babies that help the milk go more slowly, which is more like the breast. And basically, instead of holding the baby flat and the bottle up, you hold the baby more up and the bottle more flat. But this is just a super video that gives a great illustration. I won't spend a ton of time on it, but it's just it's a good video for demo.
Yes. Oh, and we have.
I just want to comment on a question that I see. Mm-hmm. Just the relationship between the stress of going back to work and school and milk production. That often stress can cause a reduction in milk supply, and not simply the number of times you pump, but if you could comment on the stress of going back to work and school.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and yeah, the countless studies have shown that stress can reduce the milk production, and like you said before, no matter how many times that you pump. And that is the unfortunate part of it, because as I said before, this is going to be a stressful time, trying to breastfeed and go back to work and find the sitter. So, just my main advice that I give mothers is just to, make sure you're, getting in that self-care, making sure you're having that bond time with the baby, because, nothing is better at drawing out your milk and keeping your milk than that skin-to-skin contact, and you having the baby at the breast as much as possible. If that means, as soon as you come home, lay the baby on the breast, get that time together so your brain can, know that, I'm still breastfeeding, have that quiet, that calm, that bond, that can do wonders at, keeping your milk and bringing your milk and calming you down as well. So that's some of the advice, I share with moms. And of course, the self-care. And I know it's a different story if they're dealing with postpartum and they're like, I don't even want to touch the baby. But and with that, that's, of course, we talk more about just, making sure you're taking, your meds and things like that. But in a situation where we're not doing postpartum, I just encourage moms to, when you get home, as soon as you can, have that bonding, have the baby draw that milk out, and, get those hormones going. Oh, sorry.
There we go. I had myself muted because there's lots of things going on in my house. We can go to the next slide, because actually I think there's a bit of that on the next slide, where LaSherion is going to be just talking about like kind of the importance of, where was that? Oh yeah. So I was just going to mention here just briefly, after baby is home, born, and shortly before the woman plans to go back to work, just thinking about practicing a little bit with the breast pump, make sure you know how it works, practicing a little bit with the bottle, and then thinking about creating a stash of breast milk. I just want to say a few things about that. I feel like there are a lot of people who feel like they need to have a huge amount of milk prepared before they go back to work. Like that's what the baby's going to drink when they're at work, is all this milk that they've stored up in the freezer. And that's not really true. The baby will drink at work what you have pumped for them in the few days before. So you don't need to have a giant stash. The woman doesn't need to have a giant stash of milk prepared. You need to have a few days, for those first few days, for the caregiver to give to the baby. But the woman will be pumping while she is at work. And the reason you don't need a giant stash is because if you plan, for example, really you need to take milk out of your breast. The woman needs to take milk out of her breast about the same number of times that the baby is eating. So let's say she's going to be gone for 9 hours and the baby's eating every 3 hours. Probably the milk she should remove milk from her breasts about 3 times. But sometimes what happens is women think, well, I don't have time for that at work. My job doesn't allow for that. I really only want to pump at my lunch hour because that's what I got time for. So what I'll do is I'll pump a whole bunch during maternity leave, get a huge stash built up, and then during my lunch hour, I'll pump. So I'll have 1 bottle for the baby from my lunch pump, and then we'll use bottles from the freezer for the other ones. But what can happen if you do that is that over time, your supply can drop. Because after a while, the body starts, well, I guess she only needs 1 bottle's worth of milk today. And supply can drop. So the baby will think at some other times during the day, which women don't need to kill off their maternity leave pumping all the time to have a giant supply. I was just to say those things back into what LaSherion was trying to say about self-care when you go back to work and stress reduction, which is half of this slide. So I kind of co-opted what you were saying, LaSherion.
Oh, yes. No problem at all. Yes. So I definitely agree with that. And, just managing your emotions, returning to work early, because as stated before, some moms don't get a chance to have almost 6 weeks off. You have to go back to work 2 days giving birth. So just managing that and making sure that even though that you can't have that full time to bond with the baby 24/7, just anytime during the day, anytime after classes, that you can have that time to bond, and is very important. Counts, and just try not to be so hard on yourself and feel like a bad parent because you don't have to feel that way. So yeah, and then just planning around the baby's needs. Planning classes, planning work, important, and being good. And the next one, oh, sorry. Yeah.
Are you ready to move on?
Yes.
Okay. Next one, we go.
So as far as how the U.S. differs from countries when it concerns returning to work, in the Western society, when we have this 2-income household, we do as a whole have less time, with our babies and less time to bond. And as far as communities in America where, especially because, we don't get paid maternal leave. So you do feel that stress to return back to work because, you're missing paychecks. The typical maternal leave, if you're gone for 3 weeks, there's 3 paychecks you missed. A lot of people don't have that luxury. As we see in other countries where, families get paid maternal leave, they get better birth outcomes. And that's why, just a little side note, I'm also with the Birth Equity Community Council, and we're working to get paid paternal, because we noticed that we look at the data that lowers the infant mortality rate. It helps parents have better bonding with their child. So that's what we notice as far as like the Western society and this pressure to return to work. you know, that we see that other countries have, you know, and also, yeah, you know, and so what the community health worker could do as far as with that, a parent or a family who's feeling like, you know, I only have 2 days off or 3 days off, and I'm feeling like such a bad parent. I'm feeling like I don't have enough time to bond with my baby. You know, just reminding them that, you know, each moment count. You know, take those little moments as far as, you know, when you get off of work or in between homework, to really have that time to have the skin to skin, have that time to look in each other's eyes, you know, sing to your baby, talk to your baby, because it is hard. It's hard not being able to be gone as long as you want. But, you know, there are ways to advocate for that, which we'll talk about later on in the presentation, you know, ways to advocate for more time and ways to advocate for bonding with your baby.
I've also heard from some people that who have immigrated to this country from other places, or rather their parents have immigrated here from other places. I've heard from some Hmong families, for example, that there are issues for them when they're pumping their breast milk. Some Hmong elders don't like to touch breast milk. They feel like that's not good or unsafe. And so sometimes that can be an issue for families. So sometimes I will ask Hmong mothers who are pumping, how does your family feel about your breastfeeding or something like that? I also talked with an African friend. We were just talking, it wasn't like a client or something. And I told her what kind of work I did, and she and the woman she was talking with thought it was hilarious because they were immigrants from Africa, and they were like, why does anybody need a person like you? Like this is ridiculous. And so, because where they were from, everybody's surrounded with women nursing all the time. And so, like in this great picture here, we have grandma like right there ready to help in this awesome photo. Like, this is what my friend was like, why are there people even being paid to do what you do? Because at home, it's just like this in this picture here. So people come from all kinds of different places with all kinds of different family support, from people surrounding them and having super helpful things to say, to sometimes people maybe having things to say that, you know, the family might have to, you know, offer their own input on. So
Yeah. Yes.
Going
And then,
off of what you ladies, oh, sorry, LaSherion.
oh no, I was just gonna add that yeah, I also had you know, from a country in Africa, and she was just telling me how you know, moving to America was very different because, you know, in America she noticed, like, you know, a lot of parents and moms, like, they strictly do this by themselves. And, you know, and back in her country and other countries, you know, it's just that generation living under one roof, and you have someone to help and be hands-on and get that hands-on service. And she feels like, you know, it's a different level of family stress that you face here when you have to, you know, do it, you know, quote unquote, you know, alone, or, you know, with not as much support and not as many generations under one roof being able to be there. So yeah, what was the question you're going to ask?
Yeah, so I was going to ask you ladies, like, when CHWs are kind of working with the mothers, I want to, you know, we want to be mindful of the way in which we start the conversation about breastfeeding, and like how, like, what their their feeding plans are. And so I kind of wanted to ask, you know, what would be an appropriate way to start that conversation that would be respectful of the different cultures that we're talking about.
Yes, and I got these questions. I have the same question. I got these questions from Linda Copay from Minnesota Breastfeeding Coalition, who's on with us. And these are some great questions. You know, just ask them. You know, were you breastfed? Is there a breastfeeding culture in your family? What is that culture? What do you know about breastfeeding? You know, what is your experience, you know, with breastfeeding? You know, just asking those non-invasive questions to get information, and, you know, listening to them in a you know, judgmental way. Because, you know, as CHWs, we have to advocate breastfeeding, and we have to make that a priority. But also, as I said before, you know, asking those questions, and I'll repeat them. You know, were you breastfed? What is your breastfeeding experience? What is the breastfeeding culture in your family? What about breastfeeding do you know? and really listening without being judgmental, and just getting those gears running to the family. And I feel like it's a great idea, my experience, when I did ask these questions, to ask with the partner in the room, to ask with as many family members in the room as possible, because you really get a sense of how the family as a whole feel about breastfeeding, you know, because, you know, the people around us do influence us. And if you're getting so many like negative, you know, reinforcements, it can really hinder breastfeeding. So, yeah.
That's really great. That's actually, I think, something that we also discussed in the previous webinars that have been recorded, about the need to like engage the partners, engage family members in the conversation around breastfeeding, but also just child rearing and learning about how the dynamics work in their family. So that's a really great reminder.
Great, I think we can go to the next slide. So here I want to get into just some basics about keeping a healthy milk supply when you're pumping, which I hope will also address a little bit of one of our questioners too, who was wondering about stress and how that can reduce your milk supply. So the first thing here is just to talk about how often a woman needs to pump. So if like this, the woman who asked the question about, you know, somebody saying, oh, I feel like my milk supply is dropping, how often do I need to pump? I'm pumping a lot. What should I be doing about how CHWs might be able to respond to that? And the main thing to know, like I think LaSherion said earlier, is that milk supply is stimulated by removing milk from the breasts. That's really the main thing. So to keep a strong milk supply, the woman must continue to remove milk from her breasts as if the baby were there. So, or at least as many times in a day as she was nursing before she returned to work or school. So like I said before, let's say the woman has a 9-hour workday. Then if the baby had been eating about every 3 hours, in an ideal world, she would pump her breasts 3 times. Now, however, that isn't always possible. People work in fields where they see clients during the day and they can't be like, oh, excuse me, I have to go pump right at this minute. Or people work in fields where it's just not possible to take breaks at particular times. We have a lot of women in the Twin Cities who work in medical assembly because we have so many, medical tech companies a lot around here. A lot of people work in medical assembly. People who work in jobs like that, it's not easy to just like skip away to pump. So when she can pump may not be entirely under her control. So if it's not possible to empty her breasts every 3 hours, the woman can consider adding pumpings when she's off or when she's at home to make up for times when she can't pump at work. For example, she might try pumping first thing in the morning, because we have a lot of milk supply first thing in the morning when our breasts are, we have highest milk producing hormones at night. So many women will notice that their breasts are fullest first thing in the morning. And so sometimes our babies can't even empty our breasts in first thing in the morning. We still feel like we've got something to give. And so sometimes that's a good time to pump, or even like as the baby is nursing on one breast, to pump on the other breast, because then we have a nice letdown, because it's easier to let down our milk to our baby, because nursing is pleasant and feeding a pump is, at best, it's okay. It's not as fun as feeding our baby. So you could try pumping when the baby's nursing on the other side, or a mother could continue to pump, could pump a little bit on her days off. So let's say she normally gets up and pumps first thing in the morning. She could continue to do that on her off days. So like, let's say she works her 9-hour day. She doesn't really have time to pump 3 times in that time frame, just too difficult. Maybe she can only pump twice. She might pump an extra 3 days a week. Maybe she squeezes in an extra pumping in the morning or in the evening, and she pumps on Saturday and Sunday once or twice. There's her extra 5 bottles. So you can make that up. It doesn't have to all be the same exact day. Another really helpful way to think about this, and a helpful way to think about keeping up milk supply when away from your baby, is the concept of the magic number. this is not mine. This is credit to a lactation consultant named Nancy Moorbacher, who's done a ton of writing books and stuff. And her idea is this: there are a certain number of times in the day that you have to remove breast milk from your breasts to keep up a good milk supply. And every woman, it's different. So let's say a woman is feeding her baby 8 times a day. So CHWs could ask these questions of a woman who's thinking about, well, how do I make sure I need to keep my baby well, I have enough milk to keep my baby well fed after I go back to work. So a CHW could say, well, how often are you feeding your baby in 24 hours right now? About 8 times. So she needs to continue to take milk out of her breasts 8 times after she goes back to work. So maybe she feeds the baby first thing in the morning and right before she goes to work, and maybe she pumps 3 times during the day and then feeds the baby after work and at bedtime and once in the night. That's 8. But perhaps you go visit the lady again in a couple months and she says, I think my supply is dropping. I don't know what to do. You could use this again and you could count together and say, well, in 24 hours, how many times are you taking milk from your breasts? And she might say, well, the baby's sleeping really well. He's sleeping through the night now. So I take milk, I nurse him in the morning, and then I pump twice at work because my breasts aren't as full anymore. So that's great. I don't need to pump as often at work. And then I feed him when I get home from work and before bed, and then he sleeps through the night. So that's great. But now she's only emptying her breasts 5 times in 24 hours. So that might be why her milk supply is going down. So then you might talk with her about how can she add some more times in the day to take milk out. It doesn't have to be evenly spaced either. We know babies don't eat in an evenly spaced way. They're not like, it's been 3 hours, I got to eat now. Sometimes it's 3 hours, sometimes it's an hour and a half, sometimes 45 minutes, sometimes it's 5 hours. So she doesn't have to be super strict with the pumping. But we did link to Nancy Moorbacher's article at the end here. It's a great one, so I encourage you to look at that. Some other things that you could think about to suggest to families to make this easier. She could think about feeding the baby the very last thing she does after leaving the baby at daycare. Like leave the baby at daycare, childcare, mom's house, wherever baby is getting left while mother goes to work, and nursing the baby right there. Because LaSherion sort of touched on that when she was talking about, is there a good place to sit down and nurse at where the baby is going to be for the day? Nurse the baby right before you leave. Also, you could ask the childcare provider, family member, whoever it is, not to give the baby a bottle right before you leave or right before mother returns to pick the baby up, because then you'll come back to a baby who's hungry. And then you can do all those great things that LaSherion mentioned. Nurse right away when you get back together, have that skin-to-skin time, that closeness, all those good bonding things, because it gives all of that. Plus, you've just saved 2 bottles. The daycare didn't have to give a bottle right when you left. The daycare didn't have to give a bottle right before you came home. And mother's breasts have been emptied at the beginning of the day and at the end. So you might have saved a couple pumping ins in there too. So that's a few tips about saving some pumping and making a good use of your milk. Additionally, you could explore the idea of running back to your childcare to feed the baby on a work break, if that's a possibility. A few places might have on-site daycare. I feel like we used to have more of those. I feel like we don't have so many anymore. Or maybe someone can bring the baby to you. That's another option you could look at. Let's go to the next slide. And here, another thing is your breasts, like we said, your breasts will make what you take out of them. So one way to go after that is making sure that you pump enough times, the woman pumps enough times. Another way to go after that is making sure that the woman is bringing enough milk out of her breasts when she does pump. So getting the most milk possible. A good way to do that is to do some breast massage while she's pumping, which you can do if you have a double pump bra. It's most efficient to pump both breasts at one time for most women. You can get those fancy bras where they're made for pumping and stuff like that. You can also just suggest to a woman that she could wear a sports bra and cut some slits in it. So cheapo method, save money, always a good tip. Don't cut the slits super big though. Those sports bras, they get stretchy, and then the holes get too big and the things fall out. So get a couple cheap sports bras, and you don't have to spend as much money on the big doodads. But doing some massage of the breasts during pumping can help bring out more milk, because our hands can feel where more milk needs to come out, where the breasts are fuller. The pump, it's just a robot. It just does this. Our hands have more feeling of what's going on. Also doing some hand expression at the end of pumping can be helpful for bringing out more milk. Research tells us more milk comes when women do these things. You often see the advice to look at pictures of your baby or videos of your baby on your phone, and that can help bring letdown and help bring the milk. That's definitely true for some women. For some women, that is not true. For women who struggle with worrying about how much milk they're getting for their baby, and thinking about, am I getting enough? I'm concerned that I'm not getting enough. That can be really anxiety producing. So sometimes I tell women, cover the bottles with a blanket or with little baby socks, or look at something totally different on your phone. Play a game, call a friend, use a meditation app and some headphones, and just relax. And then it may be that the milk comes more easily. If you're not thinking about how much is coming, oh, it's 1 ounce and I need 3, and, that makes people really nervous, and that might be harder to get more milk at that point. All right, let's go to the next one. And then last on this this theme here, thinking about how much does the baby really need at childcare. And this is good news here, because really the baby doesn't probably need quite as much as we think most of the time. Babies, by the time they get to be about 10 pounds, they need somewhere around 25 to 30 ounces a day, which, if they're eating roughly every 3 hours, is 3 or 4 ounces of feeding, which is not really that much. Breastfed babies take around 4 ounces every 2 to 4 hours, and they continue like this pretty much their whole first year. By the time they get to be a few months old, they're usually taking around 4 ounces. But the great news for breastfeeding parents is that once babies get to that 25 to 30 ounces a day, they never need more than that their whole first year, because the breast milk is so well used in their bodies, and the composition of the breast milk changes. And at around 6 months, babies start to take some other complementary foods. So it's not like women need to produce 25 ounces a day, and then 30, and then 35, and then 40, and then 45, and just keep going up and up and up. You don't. Just need to maintain, which I think is great relieving news. And sometimes we get used to the idea of feeding babies with formula. Breast milk is more easily digested than formula. And so breastfed babies will often take a 3 or 4 ounce bottle every 2-3 hours. Whereas a formula-fed baby might be more likely to take 6 or 7 ounces, like every 4 or 5 hours, because that takes longer to digest. So a breastfeeding mother does not need to produce a 7 ounce bottle for her baby. So this can be, I think, a big relief to a lot of mothers. Next.
So this is Linda. I'm wondering if I could just comment quickly.
Oh, please.
Back to childcare.
Yeah.
Just very quickly, how important it is to have that conversation and to open dialogue with your childcare provider. And it could be a childcare center. It could be family, friend, and neighbor care, like your aunt or your neighbor, but having a conversation, because then you can find opportunities. And this is about the clients you're working with, or even yourself. But the parent working with the child care center, together you can find opportunities to directly breastfeed before or after childcare, setting up the schedule to maximize breastfeeding so that perhaps a bottle isn't given to the baby 30 minutes before you pick the baby up, but really timing it to maximize the at-breast breastfeeding. And also finding opportunities to potentially come during the day to breastfeed. Another benefit of that is that when you are in the childcare setting and you are breastfeeding, the parent is being exposed to the viral and bacterial environment of that child. So you are, parent is developing antibodies. So not only is that baby receiving antibodies through breast milk from the home environment, but they're also going to receive antibodies through the breast milk from the childcare environment where they're spending hours each day. So communication with that childcare provider can be critical in really making breastfeeding successful.
That's a great point. I forgot that point about the immunity. That's wonderful.
Say, Anne, I actually had a question for the last two slides we had.
Yeah.
In talking about how often mother should feed their child and the amount of supply that a mother expresses. And
yeah.
I'm thinking of like the mothers that kind of initially decide that they may want to formula feed, or mothers that might decide that it might be too stressful to just breastfeed alone when they go back to work or school, and then they do kind of a breastfeeding as well as formula.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if you can speak to like how does that change maybe for the first one is, are mothers still able to produce the same amount, express the same amount of milk if they wait? Maybe the first month they decide they don't breastfeed and then they change their mind. How does that affect the magic number that you were talking about?
Oh yeah. If women decide not to breastfeed and then they decide several weeks or a month later that they would like to breastfeed, that's called relactation, because the milk has probably decreased or dried up, so to speak, after that period of time. Women can bring the milk back. It takes some time. Usually what's involved is bringing the baby to the breast to suckle and pumping the breasts as if the baby were at the breast, so 8 to 10 times a day. It is possible to bring the milk back. It sometimes will take as long to bring the milk back as the baby was not at the breast. So if the baby did not breastfeed at all for the first month, then it will probably take about a month for milk to come. And for some women that works great. It's done more often in other parts of the world than it is done here, where formula is not a safe option and there's unsafe water. So it's done more often than in other parts of the world. But yes, that is a thing that can happen. Probably would want to see a lactation consultant who can help with some ways to really encourage milk supply and offers her some ongoing advice and encouragement, because that is, it's kind of a project to take on, but is something that, that supply can come back. Perhaps not fully if it's been a long time, but most women can bring some milk supply back.
Thank you.
Oh, and then this slide is just about making best use of the milk when baby is at daycare, so that it doesn't get wasted. Because I do hear from women frequently that they get calls from their daycare saying there isn't enough milk. Please send more milk. We need more bottles of milk. Please give us larger amounts in the bottle. And then it's easy for the parent to feel like they don't have enough milk, like their supply is too low. But it may not really be that the supply is too low. Sometimes it might be, for example, that the baby gets a bottle of, say, 4 ounces and then is still a little bit hungry. And so they warm up another bottle and give it to the baby, but they only need it a little bit. So then the baby falls asleep. But now they've got this warmed up 3 ounces that you can't warm up and give again, so they have to toss it. So this is where that good communication that Linda was talking about with your childcare provider really comes in. So saying, Please don't warm up 4 ounces if you think my baby only needs a little top off. So parents could also consider packing their breast milk in 3 or 4 ounce bottles and maybe some little snack size 1 ounce bottles so that milk isn't getting tossed and wasted. Because many mothers have enough milk for their babies to drink, but perhaps not enough for their babies to drink and then some to be tossed, because that's really discouraging, because that's precious. Keeping some milk frozen either at home or in the freezer at childcare, or depending on what their rules are, and that's another communication piece, thinking about what are their rules around keeping milk in their freezer there. Is it a family member? Is it a childcare? Childcare centers have to follow Minnesota state food storage guidelines, so that might be something to think about. Review with your childcare provider what their special guidelines are if they have them, making sure they're familiar with, particularly if it's a family neighbor or something like that, that they know how to store breast milk safely. And we've got the storage guidelines up here. But just making sure that your childcare provider is using your milk well and not tossing out ounces of hard-earned milk. Next one. Oh, and this gets to Shandy's question, that there are families who choose not to pump at work or choose not to pump much at work, and that is okay. For some women, it's just not something that works for them. And sometimes I have heard women say, well, I would like to breastfeed, but I have to go back to work in a month, so I'm not going to. But you can. Women can breastfeed just for the first few weeks if they just have a month with their baby at home. That's okay. Breast milk is so important and so good for your baby that it doesn't matter how much they get. If they get 3 weeks, that's awesome. That's totally okay. And that woman might choose to not pump at all when she returns to work and have the baby get formula while the baby's at childcare. She could then nurse the baby when she's at home if she wants to. That's fine. Maybe she chooses to wean entirely. That's okay too. But as a community health worker, you could just help families to know that part-time breastfeeding is a thing. That's a thing that can really happen. So it can be done in all kinds of different combinations. Any amount of breast milk is valuable and is important, and you can give some formula, you can go completely to formula, after return to work, but any number of combinations are possible and good.
I definitely agree with that 100%.
Mm-hmm. Take it away, LaSherion.
Oh, yes. Okay, so self-advocacy when you are going to work or school. So one of the things that I like to share is just about as far as advocating for yourself when returning to school specifically. So what you can do with that is help the family advocate for themselves by talking to, each professor or going to a resource counselor as far as, advocating for either more time or advocating for, time in between classes to pump, if that's what they desire. Because, I myself, I had to advocate for, more time because I had my second child during my second year in college. And originally I was only supposed to get a week off. And I was like, a week is too short. So I contacted the professor and said, can I please have an additional week, with my child, additional week to work on breastfeeding, let them know that I'm still serious about work. I respect them. I respect their classroom, but this is very important for me and my child. I also had the resource counselor, help advocate for that. And I was able to get 2 weeks. And I feel like that wouldn't happen if I, wouldn't have taken those steps to advocate for myself and ask for that for me and my baby. And while letting them know that I do respect you and I respect, your class, and this isn't going to be an excuse for me to slack off. I'm still going to work really hard. I'm still going to do my work, but this is needed for me and my family. And, just flexing schedules and, splitting time. Say if you and your partner, you guys both have leave time, but you don't want one of you to take the whole 6 weeks and miss those 3 paychecks. Maybe one can take 3 weeks, the other can take 3 weeks, just planning that, talking to your employer about that, seeing how would that look. Talking about also, managing family pressure as well in regards to the type of feeding, because, sometimes, clients where they said, I want to breastfeed, but since I'm going to return to work and school, my family is saying you need to stop because it's too much. How are you going to find the time? So, with that, if that's really what you want to do, this would be a good time to say to your family, you know what, you're right. This is going to be so stressful trying to breastfeed and go to school and work. And that's why I'm going to lean on you, my support system, to, help me with that, to help me during this stressful time by, learning how to store this milk for me, learning what encouraging things I need to hear at this time. Because, at the end of the day, I do believe a lot of the times some of the discouraging things our families say to us in regards to breastfeeding, it comes from a good place. It comes from a place of them wanting to help and not want us to put more stress on ourselves. So just advocating to them saying, hey, I know that you're saying this from a good place, but, that's not really helpful. What I need you to do is just, learn how to store this milk. Tell me I'm doing a good job. Tell me I'm doing okay. And that's pretty much, all I need. And again, exploring the options of having someone bring the baby to your class, bring the baby, of course, with having your professor's consent first, because you don't want to just have someone pop up with the baby in class and you're breastfeeding and the professor's like, hey, what's going on? So just communicating that, asking that, or either your employer, saying, before you even get started with doing this, is it okay for my baby to come to work with me or come to class with me? If so, how long? If not, I understand that, and then you plan around that part as well. And, asking about even pumping in class sometimes, can I pump during class, and if they say, yeah, but is it going to be noisy? Maybe considering if you can pump in class, considering, having a handheld pump in class so it won't be so distracting. So just a lot of it is just communication, teaching the family to have that self-advocacy and know that they have rights. Because sometimes you feel as though, families feel like, do I even have a right to ask for all this? I don't want to, get fired or anything, especially families where they just started working somewhere. If they're still on their probation period, because the probation period varies from job to job. Sometimes the probation period can be for a year or, 9 months. And they get really scared to ask these questions because they don't want to lose this job, especially when you have a new baby coming. So just letting them know, talking with them about talking to HR to ask, when can I ask for this? Is it okay to ask for this? Letting them know that they have rights. It's your right to advocate for yourself and your child in that bonding time and for you to breastfeed, looking at, like I said before, easing that burden off that probation period if they just started, and, just really teaching them that, it's okay to ask. And the worst you can hear is a no. If you hear no, all we have to do is just tailor it to that no, tailor your life to that question, to that no. But yeah, those are some of the main ones.
LaSherion,
Yes.
I had a question regarding this is so important for CHWs to work with the mothers and families and for the moms to kind of think about. I'm thinking about a timeline. What would you say would be a great time to start helping and encouraging that conversation, or them to start thinking about when what that return to work or school is going to look like, and who are there going to be their support systems in these settings? When should mamas start kind of thinking about that in terms of a timeline, before? It's a lot to do, to think about, but when would we encourage them to think about these things?
Yes. I'd say I found that sometimes it's kind of hard to talk about it when they're planning, they're making their baby bag and they're getting so excited for their arrival. So I'll say, depending on the family, I feel like it's good to talk about as far as for the maternity leave. Of course, you want to talk about that when you find out you're pregnant. I feel you find out you're pregnant. And if it, like I said before, it all depends on, you have to get a feel for your supervisor as well. Because I've had some families say, well, you know, I'm pregnant and I just got hired, but I want to tell them because I don't want them to fire me or anything like that. So I'll say, if they're in that situation, you know, maybe wait till you're about like 5 months to bring it up. But as far as like talking about, as far as the leave time and talking to HR, I'd start talking about that maybe like in the second or third trimester, just so you can, you know, because, you know, you'd hate to have to, you know, once the baby's here, have to do all this and ask all those questions. So I'll say towards like the middle to end of the pregnancy is a good time to talk about it. Just so you can have that planning time, just so you can have that peace of mind. That way when the baby gets here, you don't have to rush. And again, I feel like it also depends on the family and their relationship with their supervisor. But just from my experience, I'd say maybe like, you know, between 5 and like 8 months is when you can have those conversations, just to take that burden off. And, you know your options. I feel like the earlier you know your options and the more options you know, that eases a lot of stress on the family. So, yeah, that's just my opinion, that a good time frame to talk about the leave time and the pumping and things like that.
And knowing what the leave policies are at your job.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
do you work in a kind of place where you can take 12 weeks of family medical leave, which is an unpaid but guaranteed that they have to save your job? Do you work at a smaller company that doesn't do that? You know, talk with a human resources person or something. And I see that
there's a question for you. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. Kim H is asking if schools have to provide space for students, like the employers do for their employees.
I assume that means for pumping. Is that right? I think
it doesn't say, but I believe that's what it's referring to.
Oh, they said yes.
Yep. I think the answer to that is no. Is that your understanding, LaSherion?
Well, I know under Title, what is it, Title 9, that you have to, under Title 9, they have to like make exceptions and things like that. Because I know that we were saying how, you know, you can ask the school, you know, in a respectful way to give you this. But if they don't, you can say, well, you know, according to Title 9, you know, you have to be able to include things like this for like families and women, you know, like I guess it can kind of be like a form of discrimination if you must. But a lot of schools are becoming more and more friendly with breastfeeding. A lot of schools do have like little spaces that they can give them. But yeah, you can throw out that, you know, you can throw out Title IX and how that relates to, you know, it's a form of discrimination, not giving you the space and the respect that you need to breastfeed or pump for your child.
Because Title IX has to do.
Speak to that as well.
Oh, Linda, you're there. Okay, yes.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that as well.
Yes, please do.
Students are not in the same category as employees. So the state and the federal protections for employees, that employees have time and space, do not extend to students, because students are in a different category. A student's not an employee of the school. A student is not, that's not a public space. A student is in a different category. So the protections that you look towards are really under the Title IX protections. And Title IX does protect against discrimination due to pregnancy, and breastfeeding is seen as an extension of pregnancy. But it really is school to school and state to state. There are some states like California that have legislation at the state level to protect students and requiring schools to provide those lactation spaces for students. But you will see different legislation or different policies for the K through 12, like high school students, or college and graduate school. So those are the two different categories of students. But if there is no legislation in your state, then you then the parent would probably need to talk to the administrator or the different professors or human resources. So there's, at different schools, there are different parties to talk to. And some schools are very, very supportive. Like the University of Minnesota has a robust lactation program supporting students. And some colleges or universities do not have a robust lactation support program. So doing your homework, so to speak, ahead of time. You're in high school, often there are high schools in school districts that really support those parenting students. So if the parent is in high school, it may be a different school where they can go, where there might be on-site childcare, and they're much more supportive of breastfeeding than just the regular high school.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you, Linda.
I think we might even be on a different slide at this point. I think we've moved ahead. Ah, see, there we go. Look at that.
Oh, I can't see it yet.
Self-advocacy at school. There we go.
Yes.
Maybe you already talked about all that.
Yes, yeah. Just about talking to your professors and finding time to pump, talking to them about that, communicating that. Yes, and I've talked about asking them about bringing the baby to the classroom and, learning from other students. And yeah, we talked about that, the Title IX as
all
well.
All covered.
Yep.
Next. You maybe did a lot of this too. I don't know.
Okay, so what work sites can do to support breastfeeding? So yeah, just Linda also touched on the rights for employees and employers, when it comes to making sure that moms are able to breastfeed whenever they need to at work, and have a safe space for that, so that they're not breastfeeding in the bathroom or not having to breastfeed in the break room, just providing them their own space. And yeah, that's what we talked about, starting this advocacy for leave time and breastfeeding before you give birth. Start this before the prenatal period, so that you can reduce as much stress as possible. Because I'm telling you, like, when families wait to the last minute and they're trying to call everybody and talk to everybody and they have this new baby, that just puts so much more stress to your life. So starting this before the period definitely alleviates a lot of that stress, and knowing your options and how many options you have. And again, just talking to past colleagues about how they've done it, getting some tips, that lived experience. And of course, just even if you're part-time, and I like to say, even if you're on probation, the probation period, just bringing up that possibility of bringing your baby to work, having someone bring the baby to work so that you can breastfeed. But yeah, a lot of this we did touch on.
Yep. And this is just places that you might be able to send families, like not necessarily physically, but virtually, or give them information, resources that we have around here in the Twin Cities and in Minnesota, a number of peer support networks that normally operate physically, like the Ramsey County Baby Cafes actually did have one that met in person, I believe, like 2 weeks ago. But Ramsey County runs baby cafes where they do virtual support services. La Leche League is another one. La Leche League does breastfeeding support, and they usually meet when they're meeting in person. They usually have a meeting in the daytime for parents who are home during the daytime, and then once a month often have an evening meeting for parents who are free during the evening. And I know a couple of the La Leche Leagues around the Twin Cities are doing virtual meetings right now. I can let LaSherion talk about Club Mom and Club Dad.
Yes, Club Mom and Club Dad, we are doing it virtually as well on Zoom. We meet the fourth Monday of every month, and we have different topics as far as like breastfeeding, nutrition for mom and baby. We talk about mental health and managing stress, the stresses of being a parent, especially a new parent. And a lot of what we talk about. Like we have professionals come in to talk about those different areas, but a lot of the community comes from the participants. You know, it's to get moms connected to other mothers in the community who's going through what they're going through. You know, again, that lived experience is priceless. You know, mothers really come for that. They come for the information as well. They come for lived experience. And when we were doing it in person, we would have dinner and free childcare for the whole time. And we gave the moms and dads cabs there and back if they needed that. So yeah, but right now we are meeting virtually and we still have the same topics, and we offer the moms to, you know, the participants to open their hands out and give the moms like different advice and different things as far as experiences. And some of the club dad participants talked about how what we should start doing is whenever a family has a new baby, we should all take shifts of bringing over dinner for the family. You know, so they don't have to cook while they're trying to bond with the baby. You know, we should take shifts of cleaning up, just trying to make it more community-based and ease the stress and the burden off the parents when it has to come to cooking and cleaning and things like that. So, yeah, it's a community.
That's a great idea.
Thank you.
Let's see, anything else?
No. Yeah, these are some pretty great resources in Ramsey County just to keep families motivated and encouraged. And so, yeah, and the recap is just self-care is so important during this time. You know, the time of having a new baby, returning back to work, especially if you have other kids. You know, you don't want to be running on E. You don't want to be pouring from an empty cup and not have anything left for yourself. Because before you know it, you're going to be screaming and crying and going crazy. So it's good to be good to yourself, not only by, you know, doing self-care as far as things you like to do, but just telling yourself positive affirmations like, you know, I'm doing the best I can. I'm doing a good job. I'm trying to be a great parent. You know, I'm trying to plan everything. And, you know, there's no right way. You know, balance looks different for everybody. Also, you know, again, just reiterating, there's no right way. There's no perfect way. You know, this whole experience, even though we're giving these tips on what to do and how it should look and things like that, it looks different for everybody. And I guess, you know, you have to find your own new normal, you know, when you become a parent and have to go back to work or school. And again, we just want to stress the fact that, you know, planning is so important, and being able to advocate, you know, with your family, for your family, to your school and your employers, and, you know, leaning on your support system. Because I can't say enough how, you know, trying to do all this by yourself is going to be so stressful. And, you know, I had to learn that myself. You know, when I had a new baby returning back to work and school, you know, I didn't like to ask for help. And, you know, me doing it by myself for like the first 6 weeks, I was just like crying and like, oh my gosh, like I thought I could be the superwoman, but I need help. You know, I need help. So just remembering that there's nothing wrong with help. No such thing as perfect. No right or wrong way. These are just guidelines. Again, be good to yourself. I just need to repeat that. Be good to yourself. Have that self-care, and lean on any, you know, your spirituality system. Not saying you have to be religious or anything, but connecting with your spiritual elders, getting that time to meditate, pray. I know exercising is going to be really hard, so I'm not going to throw that in there to try to put pressure on anybody, but, you know, getting that physical movement. During this time, you definitely want to recharge your batteries. If you run on empty batteries, you're going to crash. And that's just the way it is.
And I think as healthcare providers, we can tell the families we work with that, you know, it's okay that it's hard. Like LaSherion said, it's you know, it's okay that it's challenging. I will remember as we close here, just to share the first day that I went back to work after I had my oldest. I got back to work. I had dropped him off at his daycare. I got up to the floor where I was working as a nurse, and somebody said, "Hey, great to see you. Aren't you glad to be back?" And I thought, absolutely not. No, not glad to be back at all. But then you have to put on a happy face and be like, yeah. So it's okay, totally okay. So just, you know, share that with people.
Yeah.
And I think at the last here, we've just got a list of various resources. This is super tiny looking at it like this, but you will be able to go back and look at it when the slides are available in a PDF. Are there other questions that folks have, that things we didn't address or things that they would like more information on? Oh, thanks, Linda.
This is Linda Kopecki, Minnesota Breastfeeding Coalition. I just wanted to remind folks that there's on Thursday, NBC is hosting a workshop. Instead of our fall conference, which is usually in person, we're just going to have shorter, smaller workshops throughout the year. And right now, virtual. The one coming up is including a small, shorter version of the baby behavior workshop that was on August 8th. And we'll also be having some local experts just discussing helping families or helping parents prepare for that immediate postpartum period. Given the COVID-19 pandemic, and you know, how to build in that family support system, even if you don't have a built-in family support system, how to plan ahead and create that's in line with your culture and your background.
Yes, and also just touching on the family support system, I watched it was called the Chocolate Milk documentary, and it was about like Black women and breastfeeding. And one of the moms there said that when she had her baby, before she had her baby, her doula told her, you know, during this time, you're going to need your support system. So ask your family, friends, whoever, if someone can be in charge of, you know, helping you cook meals one day, or someone can be in charge of, you know, helping take care of the other kids, you know, just ask people. And at first the mom was like, you know, oh, well, I don't know if anybody's going to want to do that. But she said everybody she asked was just so happy to help. They were like, oh my gosh, yes, I want to be in charge of this. I'll be in charge of that. I'm going to help with this. You know, everybody was just, she was so shocked at how helpful everybody wanted to be, you know, because everybody wanted to have a part in helping her. And they also wanted to see the baby too more often. So I definitely encourage that as well. You know, you'd be surprised how many people actually want to help and are happy to help. Because, you know, a lot of the times, you know, we want to do everything by ourselves and, you know, feel like we got this, but you'd be surprised.
That's a great tip.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Well, this is Ann again, Ann Gainey, not Ann Oswood. And I would just like to thank Ann and LaSherion for such a great presentation on a topic that it's likely all community health workers are going to be asked about. And I want to thank Shandy, who I think has had to leave us for her other job. And then also thank you to Linda Kopecki and the Minnesota Breastfeeding Coalition for making this opportunity possible. All of these webinars, including this one, will be posted on both of our websites. The links are here. And the PowerPoint will also be posted there, so you can look at that for all of the wonderful resources in it. And that's all we have for now, but until we meet again, take care, stay safe, and please enjoy the rest of the summer. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much.